Hello and welcome to G Fun Facts Online. Our planet feels solid, permanent. The mountains and valleys we see seem like they've been here forever, but the Earth has a violent secret, a history of catastrophic events, so powerful they reshaped entire continents in the geological blink of an eye. Today, we're talking about megafloods. These aren't your typical river overflowing its banks floods. A megaflood is a cataclysmic deluge, a sudden release of water with a flow rate that can match major ocean currents, sometimes reaching over 1 million cubic meters per second. They're triggered by collapsing glacial dams, volcanic eruptions, and even rising seas spilling over entire landmasses. The evidence they leave behind is just as monumental. Vast, scoured-out canyons, waterfalls hundreds of feet high but completely dry, and gravel bars the size of small mountains. This is the story of a watery fury that carved the world we know. So what unleashes a megaflood? The most common culprit, especially during the ice ages, was the failure of a glacial dam. Imagine vast ice sheets, miles thick, blocking river valleys and trapping enormous lakes of meltwater, some holding as much water as all the Great Lakes combined. These ice dams weren't invincible. Sometimes, the lake would get so deep it would literally float the ice dam, allowing water to burst out from underneath. Other times, cracks and tunnels would form within the ice, and the rushing water would rapidly enlarge them, causing a total structural collapse. When that dam broke, the energy released was almost unimaginable. A wall of water, hundreds of feet high, carrying icebergs the size of buildings, would roar across the landscape at highway speeds, stripping away soil and carving canyons into solid bedrock in a matter of days. But glaciers weren't the only dam builders. Massive landslides could also block rivers, creating temporary lakes. When these earthen dams inevitably failed, the result was catastrophic. A tragic example happened in 1786 in Sichuan, China, where a landslide dam collapsed on the Dadu River. The resulting flood traveled over 800 miles and claimed an estimated 100,000 lives. Volcanoes can do it too. Lava flows, or volcanic mud flows, can easily block a river, and when that dam gives way, it triggers a devastating flood. An ancient eruption of Mount St. Helens did exactly this, and the breach of the ancestral Spirit Lake created its own cataclysm. Now let's zoom out to an even grander scale. Megafloods can happen when rising sea levels overtop a land bridge, allowing an entire ocean to pour into a basin that was previously dry and far below sea level. This is how entire seas are born in a geological instant. Perhaps the most famous and well-studied megafloods are the ones that created a bizarre and alien landscape in eastern Washington, known as the Channeled Scablands. This story is also one of scientific rebellion, led by a geologist named J. Harlan Bretz. In the 1920s, Bretz was exploring this arid region and found features that made no sense. He saw immense, dry canyons with no rivers in them, giant potholes scoured into hard volcanic rock, and massive gravel hills perched high above any possible water source. He proposed a radical, almost heretical idea. This entire landscape wasn't carved slowly over millions of years. It was carved by a single, catastrophic flood of biblical proportions. This flew in the face of the geology of the day, which believed that all landforms were created by slow, uniform processes. The idea of a sudden catastrophe was dismissed as unscientific. For decades, Brett's theory was ridiculed, and he was practically a pariah in the geological community. But he didn't back down. He spent years meticulously documenting the evidence. He pointed to the Channeled Scablands themselves, a chaotic network of dry channels stripped bare down to the bedrock. He pointed to Grand Coulee, a 60-mile-long canyon which contains dry falls, a cliff face 3.5 miles wide and 400 feet high. This was once a waterfall, many times the size of Niagara, but today it's bone dry. He documented giant current ripples, hills of gravel, up to 49 feet high, shaped exactly like the tiny ripples you see in a stream bed, but on a gargantuan scale. He found huge boulders, called glacial erratics, made of rock types not found anywhere nearby, which he argued were rafted in on giant icebergs carried by the flood. The one piece Bretz was missing was the source. Where did all this water come from? The answer came in the 1940s from another geologist, Joseph Pardee. Pardee was studying the mountains of western Montana and found faint, horizontal lines etched into the mountainsides. They were ancient shorelines. He had discovered the remnants of an enormous ice-dammed lake, which he named Glacial Lake Missoula. This lake was up to 2,000 feet deep and held about 500 cubic miles of water. Pardee also found evidence that the ice dam holding it back had failed catastrophically. This was Brett's smoking gun. The repeated filling and draining of this gigantic lake was the source of the water that carved the Channeled Scablands. Further research showed it wasn't just one flood, but dozens. Between about 15,000 and 13,000 years ago, the ice dam would form, the lake would fill, the dam would fail, and a megaflood would be unleashed. This cycle repeated over and over. At their peak, the Missoula floods had a flow rate 10 times the flow of all the rivers in the world combined, with water moving at up to 80 miles per hour. For his revolutionary work, which completely changed our understanding of geology, J. Harlan Bretz was finally awarded the highest honor of the Geological Society of America in 1979. He was 96 years old. As incredible as the Missoula floods were, they were dwarfed by an even larger event that happened millions of years earlier, the Zanclean flood, which refilled the Mediterranean Sea. Around 6 million years ago, tectonic movements closed the connection between the Atlantic Ocean and the Mediterranean. Since the Mediterranean evaporates more water than it receives from rivers, it began to dry up. This period is called the Messinian Salinity Crisis. For hundreds of thousands of years, the Mediterranean basin was a vast, arid salt desert, more than a mile below sea level in some places. Then, about 5.33 million years ago, the land bridge at what is now the Strait of Gibraltar was breached. The Atlantic Ocean began to pour into the desiccated basin, triggering what is thought to be the largest flood in known Earth history. Scientists now believe this was a rapid, catastrophic event. Evidence includes a massive erosion channel carved into the seafloor and huge streamlined ridges in southeastern Sicily, all pointing to a massive, fast-moving flow. The discharge rate is estimated to have been up to 100 million cubic meters per second. That's 1,000 times larger than the Amazon River today. It's estimated that 90% of the Mediterranean basin was refilled in a period of just a few months to 2 years. At times, the water level in the basin was rising by more than 10 meters, or 33 feet per day. It was an event that didn't just end a geological crisis. It permanently altered the geography and biodiversity of an entire region. And these events happened all over the world. In the Altai Mountains of Siberia, geologists found a landscape that rivals the Channeled Scablands, carved by the repeated failure of glacial dams holding back lakes, similar in size to Lake Missoula. These Altai floods created giant gravel bars over 300 meters, or nearly 1,000 feet high. Even the existence of Great Britain as an island is the result of megafloods. Around 450,000 years ago, a chalk ridge connected what is now England and France. A massive glacial lake to the north, fed by the Rhine and Thames rivers, eventually overtopped this ridge. The torrent of water carved a massive channel, with a peak flow estimated at 1 million cubic meters per second. A second, even bigger flood likely happened later, widening the channel and permanently severing Britain from mainland Europe. Then there's the Black Sea, which was once a freshwater lake. Around 600 years ago, as sea levels rose, geologists William Ryan and Walter Pittman proposed that the Mediterranean Sea breached a sill at the Bosporus Strait. sending a catastrophic flood of salt water into the Black Sea basin with the force of hundreds of Niagara Falls. They controversially suggested this event might be the historical basis for the story of Noah's Ark and other flood myths in the region, though this theory is still debated. Back in North America, we also had the Bonneville flood. About 17,400 years ago, Lake Bonneville, a huge Ice Age lake that covered much of modern-day Utah, breached a natural dam in Idaho. It was a single, immense event, releasing nearly 1,000 cubic miles of water. It scoured deep canyons along the Snake River before eventually flowing into the Columbia River and out to the Pacific. So what is the lasting legacy of these incredible events? It's written on the face of our planet. From the coulees of Washington to the colossal gravel bars of Siberia, they reshaped biodiversity, like when the Zanclean flood repopulated the Mediterranean, or when the English Channel flood isolated Britain, changing the course of its flora, fauna, and eventually, human history. The study of these floods even helps us understand other worlds. The outflow channels on Mars look eerily similar to the Channeled Scablands, suggesting Mars, too, may have had catastrophic floods in its ancient past. For a long time, megafloods seemed like relics of a distant past. But with our climate changing rapidly, scientists are starting to ask a disturbing question: could they happen again? In California, research suggests that climate change is sharply increasing the risk of a catastrophic megaflood caused not by a glacial dam, but by a series of atmospheric rivers, long plumes of concentrated water vapor. Such an event could turn much of the state into a vast inland sea. Studies suggest the chance of this happening has already doubled. And then there are the world's remaining ice sheets in Greenland and Antarctica. As they melt, huge lakes are forming on, under, and around the ice. The sudden drainage of these lakes can cause major floods. While we're unlikely to see a continental-scale repeat of the Missoula floods, the potential for large, destructive outburst floods is a real and growing concern. The story of megafloods is a dramatic reminder of the immense power of nature. It's a story of scientific discovery against all odds, and a stark warning. By understanding the forces that violently reshaped our planet in the past, we can better anticipate and prepare for the challenges of our future in a dynamic and ever-changing world. Thanks for listening to Fun Facts Online.